When life gets unpredictable, preparation matters. In medicine, it's all about staying alert, ready for whatever comes through the door. On the road, it's no different. That's why Volvo designs vehicles to help anticipate risk, reduce harm, and protect lives. The Volvo XC90's advanced safety systems inspire confident decisions wherever the road takes you. The Volvo XC90, for life. Proud sponsor of the Pit Podcast. Learn more at volvocars.ca/safety.
All right, welcome to the second hour of the Elias Macko Show, and we begin this hour with I hope, a good discussion about free speech. Now, Washington is preparing to wade directly into Europe's speech wars. Reuters reporting last week that the U.S. State Department is developing a new online portal hosted at freedom.gov that would allow users in Europe and elsewhere to access content banned by their own governments, including material labeled as hate speech or even terrorist propaganda. According to sources familiar with the plan, officials have even discussed embedding a built-in VPN function. VPN, if you haven't heard about that allows you to hide your internet traffic from your internet service provider. And just this morning out of the UK, we're finding out there that they are going to regulate Netflix, other streaming platforms, Amazon Video, Prime Video, Disney. They're going to regulate them like their local broadcasters. So they're going to have to comply with laws against harmful or offensive materials. Some would say that's an example of countries wading into American affairs. Let's talk about this more with Sarah McLaughlin, senior scholar for global expression with the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, also known as FIRE. Sarah, welcome back to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me again.
It just seems to me like everyone's getting into everyone else's business when it comes to free speech. How do you see it?
You know, it's an interesting thing what's happening with this freedom.gov portal. And I think it's kind of broadly representative of the issues we're having between the US and Europe when it comes to censorship, especially on the internet. It's definitely become a focus for the Trump administration, internet censorship in Europe, and the ways that European countries are trying to regulate, sometimes to the point of absurdity, what happens on the internet and what their citizens can access. And a lot of this is being done in, shockingly liberal, extremely overly bureaucratic ways. But the other side of it is that the Trump administration also does not exactly have much of a leg to stand on this issue. So especially when it comes to the freedom.gov portal, I was reading that it actually may be run through the Department of Homeland Security. Mm-hmm. And what I'm not sure if everyone would be aware of this, but what's also been happening in the US right now is that the Department of Homeland Security has been issuing subpoenas to get the information of people who have been criticizing ICE and DHS on the internet. So criticizing immigration enforcement in the United States. Mm-hmm. So, and this really just boils down to what's going on in this moment. The Trump administration is right. There is serious internet censorship happening in Europe. But the Trump administration is also doing some of those things here in the U.S.
So, it's interesting. We have a panel every morning at 9 o'clock on this program. Last week, we talked about this story on our panel, and the panelists were like, they like the idea. They're like, the Trump administration is the wrong administration to do it for the reasons that you mentioned. There's a bit of hypocrisy that comes of that. But one thing that you said, Sarah, is that, in Europe, I think you called it absurd situations. There's certain things that are happening that are absurd. And just for our listeners here, why don't we talk a little bit about that? I think our listeners want to know about the truly absurd situations in Europe that we may not be aware of.
Sure. So there's a few different things happening. One is the DSA, the Digital Services Act, which is employed by the European Union, and it's an extremely bureaucratic, complex, confusing process that I'm not sure the people enforcing it or the people who are being enforced by it even understand the rules that they are having to abide by. And there have been some really high profile flaps that have taken place because of the DSA. There was a major fine that was issued to Elon Musk's X in recent months. And there was the past EU commissioner actually threatened Elon Musk just for hosting Donald Trump for a debate on X or for
Uh-huh.
a discussion on X. And these are the kinds of things that people look at and they say, no, why is the EU saying that, before an event even happens, that there might be some risk that it's violating the law for a presidential candidate who ultimately won the candidacy to discuss things on the internet. And then, if we look at the UK, which you mentioned, they have been enforcing the Online Safety Act, which has such a broad and sometimes warped sense of online harms. And even, in addition to that, there's the issue of age verification,
Uh-huh.
which is sweeping Europe, Australia, a lot of the world right now. Some US states actually are trying to enforce age verification. And so, we have a number of different things going on with European censorship issues. And then the age verification, which a lot of people look at and they say, well, listen, I'm sympathetic. There are things I don't want my kids seeing on the internet. And I totally understand that. But ultimately, these age verification things are going to require people to hand over their information
Uh-huh.
in ways that risks anonymous speech. And there is no age verification only for children. Age verification is for everyone because you need to verify your
That you're not a
age.
child, yeah.
Exactly. And in the UK, to access this harmful content, as they call it, some of it is just news. It's just what's happening in the world because, included under harmful content or is violence. And unfortunately, we live in a world that has a lot of violence
So,
in it.
so you're
And
telling me that it could be interpreted like you want to report on violent acts, it would be against these regulations?
it would be you would have to prove your age, for example, to access
To act.
news
Oh my goodness.
about
Okay.
violent content. So I was writing about the protests in Iran recently, and the horrific internet censorship that was taking place by the Iranian
Mhm.
government. But because of the mass violence against protesters, I pointed out, it's possible that people in the UK wouldn't even be able to necessarily access this information because it could fall under the umbrella of harmful
Wow.
content.
Wow.
And in addition to that, a lot of these companies, they're going to care about their bottom line more than anything else. And so there's a real risk that they will over censor, they will over classify information because they'd rather, apply these restrictions too broadly rather than face,
Mm.
huge $1 million fines. And so that's the risk here. It's not just, these policies might be very broad to start with, that the companies will feel pressure to apply them even broader than they might necessarily need to.
Can I just ask you, because on the age stuff, right? I think our listeners, they're actually and even myself, like I see some of the stuff that happens to young children on social media. I think I'm open to what they've done in Australia, 16 years old before you can open an account. Give me that. Do you and Fire have seemingly you've got a position where you think this is the wrong way to go? But I'm trying to figure out, well, how do you protect young children from some of those ills, like that, that balance? How do you view that subject?
Yeah, it's for the first thing you need to think about is that people always have good reasons for why they want to censor speech, right?
Mm-hmm.
We always have good reasons. It's hateful, it's wrong, it's a lie, it's harmful to children. So we always need to look at these issues with the understanding that there's a lot of good reasons you might have for wanting something to not be accessible to people. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a good idea for the government to create rules. I think we can all probably, across the political spectrum, come up with government officials that we don't want setting and enforcing those rules for us.
Uh-huh.
So that's the preliminary thing. But secondly, a lot of people really, I think, misunderstand the way that age verification works. It's for everyone. Everyone's going to have to hand over their information. And, there's already been hacks of, the companies that are used to do these verifications. There is a really real risk that this could effectively end what we have right now for internet anonymity. And, that's a real risk for a lot of people out there. There are
Right.
young kids who might have to say things on the internet about their parents or the struggles they're having. Do we really want to make sure that they can't access the internet? There's a lot of different things here that we need to consider. There's a lot of censorship that seems like a good idea,
Yeah.
but when you really spend the time working it out, you realize there's actually a lot of risks to our rights that come from it.
Which is, by the way, one of the reasons why I feel, depending on who's saying it, we view it differently. And why, we sometimes when there's censorship from one side of the political divide, because their heart's in the right place, we view it differently as when it comes from the other side of the political divide. Continuing our discussion on free speech across the globe with Sarah McLaughlin. She's senior scholar for global expression with the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression. You also know it as FIRE. So Sarah, let's pick up on a couple of things you mentioned before. One of the things you mentioned is how the European Union had gone after X, right? Elon Musk's, the old Twitter, right? And I'm wondering if you feel that the European Union treats all platforms equally when they determine who they'll go after. I read an article in the Guardian. It was a 15-year-old that wrote about what she faces every day on TikTok and Instagram and how terrible her life is. And I said, if that same article had been published and it was about what she faces on X, there'd be investigations all around. And sometimes I feel like the European Union plays a little bit of politics. Now, everyone plays politics, got to be fair. But I wonder if you feel that way, if the European Union plays politics with how they treat the various platforms.
Well, I definitely think there has been a hyper focus on X to a certain extent. And part of that is because, I think Elon Musk has made his political views very clear, and he has also been very vocal about his disregard and dislike for, the European Union system, for a lot of the political leaders that are operating in Europe right now. And so I do think he has absolutely put or drawn the attention of regulators in the EU. I think that's definitely the case. I do think there have been a couple things that have been happening recently with X that have raised a little bit more concerns. There were some, possibility of actual, things that would even be, investigated in the United States, images that Grok was producing of children, which, there are valid reasons to investigate criminal activity. But what we were also seeing were that there were threats, that were not proportionate. There were a few countries that said they were just going to ban X completely. And what free speech advocates want is they want, the appropriate response to things. If there's illegal activity, you investigate it, but you don't just wholesale ban a platform. That's how you ban, a tool that millions of people rely on to speak and express themselves. And whether you like X or don't like X, it's kind of the same for any platform. I have concerns about TikTok, for example. I write a lot about censorship in China, but that also doesn't mean that a wholesale ban is correct. And so we really need to have proportional responses to these things. And just banning platforms is, that's not a tool that we should expect democratic countries to immediately leap to when these things happen on the internet.
I got to ask you, do you think Elon Musk purchasing Twitter now, years later, has been good for free speech?
Elon Musk has said a lot of things about free speech, but unfortunately, he has not proven himself to be a good ally for free expression. There are certain things that are you can't actually say on X, that your account will be, your account might be hidden, your tweets might be hidden if you say it, you might be banned. And, he has said a lot of things himself. He's recently suggested that, I believe, calling someone a fascist is incitement to violence, and that should be punished. And let me tell you, under American law, you can call someone a fascist. That's very legal. So, it's really a shame because I think it's fueled a lot of people's perception that, there are no real principled defenders of free speech out there. And a lot of people are in it just for themselves, and it's a grift of some sort. And, that's really not the case. I know a lot of people, including my colleagues at FIRE, who believe in free expression, not as a front for something, but as a human value.
I wonder if, one of the ways I'm viewing what's happening right now, whether it's, these moves in Washington for this online portal, the regulations and the things you see out of European regulators, it almost feels like it's an arms race. It's between various powers and countries on how to police speech. And, in a traditional arms race, one of the ways to get out of it would be, okay, a detente, and we're gonna de-arm. And I wonder if you view it the same way when it comes to free speech, if both the U.S. and Europe and other big powers need to de-escalate on rules as opposed to fighting each other with more and more rules and ways of getting around them.
Yeah, and that's something that we've written about at Fire recently. We've said that, perhaps there needs to be some kind of diplomatic solution here. We need to have conversations, across the Atlantic about how we can ensure that, European countries are not trying to regulate American tech companies in ways that are going to actually violate Americans' ability to access the internet here on American shores. That's the ultimate issue. But it is going to be very difficult to make that case if other countries don't think we're coming to this in good faith. Mm-hmm. And I think right now, with the way the Trump administration, we've even been suggesting we're going to make European tourists who are coming here for a quick trip to Disney hand over 5 years of social media history to do so. I think they might look at that and say, you guys aren't operating in good faith. You don't actually want to protect free speech. And that's going to be the challenge here. How do we make sure that there's good faith discussions about this, where people really believe that the goal is to protect free expression and not different motives?
Are there voices that you think our listeners should pay particular attention to on this subject? Obviously, I'm not talking about your colleagues at Fire, obviously there, but I'm talking about politicians. Like, are there politicians that you see, not Trump, but maybe someone in the U.S. administration that you pay particular attention to? Or on the European side of things, people that have, a rational take on this that maybe should be elevated when we talk about people we should be listening to instead of the bluster of Donald Trump?
Right now, I would not say that there's a wealth of good advocates in office for this, but there's still a lot of good people, who care about this issue, and ultimately, you have to find ways to work with people who, might take some convincing on this, and that's what advocacy is. It's trying to make the case and get people to see and understand why this issue matters. And, I believe that there's still a lot of people whose minds can be open to this issue.
Sarah, great discussion this morning. Again, thanks for coming on and talking to our listeners. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Sarah McLaughlin is a senior scholar for global expression with the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, also known as FIRE.
I'm Dylan Playfair.
And I'm Tyler Smith.
We're putting loneliness in the penalty box by talking to some of our favorite athletes about the importance of friendship.
This is Bromance.
Bromance is brought to you by Charm Diamond Centers, proudly Canadian-owned and operated. Charm has been part of your love stories and bromances for over 50 years.
And you can find Bromance on the iHeartRadio network or wherever you get your podcasts.